So, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Thank you so much for coming.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والتأدب والتأديب والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء مرضات الله ووجهه وقربه وزواله سبحانه. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. This is the second lesson in Ajaib al-Qalb from Imam al-Ghazali, his Ihya book 21, that's right in the middle of the book. Marvels of the heart, matters of the heart, and we began yesterday. And before we go further today, let's just review some of what we said yesterday. So we began by stressing the importance of the heart. And we mentioned the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he says, "Ala wa inna fil jasadi mudghatan idha salahat salaha al jasadu kulluhu wa idha fasadat fasada al jasadu kulluhu ala wa huwa al qalb." In the body there is a piece of flesh which, if it is sound, the whole body is sound. And if it is unsound, the whole body is unsound. It is the heart, stated emphatically. Indeed, it is the heart, or it is nothing but the heart. Ala wa huwa al-qalb. And then we emphasize the fact that when we talk about the heart, the way that we understand it, we see that the components of the heart and the heart itself is always a conjunction and a combination of the seen and the unseen, of the physical and the non-physical. And so therefore we mentioned that, and this is very clear in the hadith, although in fact the hadith stresses the physical. It's as if in speaking about the heart, it were just the muscular heart. And that's very important because it shows us that although we're going to speak about the spiritual heart or the metaphysical heart, the malakuti heart, it's never disassociated from this one that we have here. And we showed that these four elements of the perfected heart, of the pure heart, the heart which has tremendous receptivity to God and to truth, all these elements are physiological as well as they are spiritual. So we talked about the nafs, we talked about the aql, we talked about the qalb itself, and we talked about the ruh, the soul, the intellect, the heart, and the spirit. And we saw that the soul, the nafs, the soul, the nafs is associated with what? What do we associate it with physiologically? We associate with the blood. And so therefore, just as the blood goes through every part of your body, then also your soul flows with that blood. And we call that an nafsu sa'ila. And here sa'ila is the flowing nafs. So that's a physiological soul. And of course, it's going to be associated with the heart because the blood is pumped by the heart. And it's going to be associated with the liver because the liver is fundamental in the process of the blood's doing what it has to do physiologically. And then we saw that the intellect is associated in our tradition with the brain, the dimag, and our scholars knew a great deal about the different compartments of the brain and the different things that they affect. And but also we associate it also with the muscular heart as well. And we noted when we spoke about the wonders of the muscular heart, this incredible, faithful pumping blood by the thousands of liters every day through your vascular system, which if we were to stretch it out, would go around the earth twice at the equator. That the heart, the muscular heart also has brain-like functions. It has in it neurons. And it communicates to the brain communicates to it. And we know from experimental science that the heart has a certain independence from the brain. It begins to work before the brain's even formed. And it can continue to function even when the brain is technically dead. And, so even in looking at the physiological heart, it is an amazing, absolutely amazing organ. But the intellect is associated with that heart and then also with the brain. And then we talk about the heart, the qalb, and we associate that with the heart. And we talk about the spirit, the ruh, which is in many ways the greatest of all of these, because when you enable your spirit to take control of your heart, then you're on the way to eternal felicity and bliss. Everything's going to be okay with you. The only problems that we have with ourselves really come from blocking the spirit and giving priority to other tendencies that we have, the appetite, anger, and so forth. But the spirit is a remarkable thing. Yet this spirit, which is so intangible, we can't touch it, we can't see it, although we know that when it's gone, the person's dead. And that's true of animals. Animals have spirits too. So the spirit is what gives us life. But the spirit we associate with what? Could you say that again? What physiological thing?
The brain and the liver.
Very good. So we associate the heart. These three things really. The spirit is associated with the heart, but in our tradition we associate it with the cavities of the heart or the hollowness of the heart. And then we associate it with the brain, and we associate it with the liver. But the spirit that is associated with the liver is the most basic one of all. And we call that the animal spirit. And we say that the angelic spirit or the malakuti spirit in you, it rides on the animal spirit like a horseman or a horsewoman rides on the horse. It's your vehicle. And we talked about this quite a bit, but this is why everything in you is good. Everything in you is necessary. And your perfection as a human being and your spiritual fulfillment as a servant of God It requires that you have the whole of you intact, from the lowest to the highest, the physiological and the spiritual as well. And I mentioned the definition that Al-Qutb al-Dardir, who's one of the great Azhari scholars of the 18th century, 1700s, he said in his definition of Sufism that it was علم يعرف به سلامة الصدر والحواس, which is an amazing definition, but it's a knowledge or a science by which you know the soundness of the chest or the heart and of the senses, all the senses, touch, smell, taste, seeing, hearing, and then the internal senses like imagination and memory and thought. So all, and this is because the whole you, everything in you, has got to be brought to its fullest perfection possible. And so, before we move on from that, let's just talk about it a little bit more. That here you see a prophetic worldview in which we don't have these dualisms, radical dualisms that are characteristic of many peoples and many traditions, like the radical division between body and spirit, or between physical and material. And this is a dualism which goes through many ancient traditions and even traditions after that. In fact, in modern thought, it is something called Cartesian dualism, which is one of the biggest problems with all modern thought. Radical dichotomy, a radical dichotomy between thing, object, and subject. The perceiving subject, you, with your mind, which is a made-up word, by the way. Mind, the way that Descartes understood it, we never used the word that way before. But you have the subject, you have the object, and there is a complete chasm between the two. Dualisms are all, in my opinion, every dualism is wrong. Every dualism is wrong. So here, in our religious tradition, we see that, the physical and the spiritual, they go absolutely together. And the one of them, let's say the spiritual, it relies on the physical, just as the physical cannot be illuminated without the spiritual. So here there is no dualism. There is this amazing continuum, between the physical and the spiritual. And maybe we could just say another point too. We talked about the fact that we believe in levels of existence. We're not reductionists at all. The reductionists may say, for example, nothing exists but what is mulki. Nothing exists but what you can see, touch, taste, smell, and hear. That's the materialist point of view. That there is no reality, there is no existence beyond this world that we can touch, taste, smell, hear, and see. That's reductionism. We expand it vastly. We say that no, there is this world, which is the mulk, and then there is the malakut, which is like the mirror of it, and which is superior to it, and which dominates it, and it only reflects. And then there's the Jabarut. And we talk about different levels of existence. And we don't want to confuse you with that or to belabor that. But when we talk here about the soul being associated with the blood, but then also with النفس المطمئنة, النفس الراضية, النفس المرضية, the nafs that أدخلي في عبادي, and so forth. Where are these different realities? In other words, I have my muscular heart right here. So where is that Malakuti heart? Where is that spiritual heart? And more than likely, we're going to think of it as something sort of hovering around us. You know, I've got my physical heart here, and then somewhere there's this vague spiritual reality of the spiritual heart. Okay, and that would be a misconception. And again, this shows you, I hope, to what extent there is no dualism here at all. So when we when we listen to our great heirs of the Prophet who talk to us about these things, they will say, well, where is the mulk? It's right here. This is it, okay? You can see this, you can touch it, okay? This is no question. So where is the malakuti dimension of this? Because it has one in our belief. Okay, so likely I'm going to imagine some other reality of this microphone, whatever that would be, way up there someplace. And then if we were to talk about the Jabaruti, way beyond that. So that would be a misconception. Because we would say that the mulki aspect of this thing is right here. The malakuti aspect of it is right here too. And the Jabaruti aspect of it is right here too. And that's why, as we say, we're not talking about just the muscular heart, which you can study in medicine and in surgery and whatever you do and look at in the laboratory and make experiments on, okay, that physical heart. But we're talking about the spiritual heart, but it's right there too. It's right there too. And any other aspects of it is right there too. They're not identical, but they're not different. And it's not in another place, and it doesn't hover above. How are you, Rebecca? Good to see you. Oh, Amina, how are you? Welcome. Welcome to Beirut. I hope I can say that on behalf of you. Welcome to Beirut. MashaAllah. So this is really important. And do you understand what I'm saying? Well, I don't understand what I'm saying. I'll have to ask you. But these are conceptions that we want to put into our hearts and keep them there and contemplate on them. Just like when we speak about spiritual journeying, suluk, we're not talking about a distance of 100 light years or something like that. We're talking about something that happens right here. There is no distance. But when the veils are removed and when we become right, then you see it right there before you. So this is part of the review of that. I hope that makes sense. I hope it's not confusing. Okay, well, you can ask questions. But not now. Okay. At the end, inshallah. Okay. I should let you ask questions, but I think we just put them at the end if you don't mind. Then we talked a long time about the nafs. And the nafs is jami' ash-shahwati wal-ghadab. This is the lowest human soul. That's the word we use for nafs. Soul. S-O-U-L. The lowest human nafs, this is how we define it, that it is jami' ash-shahwati wal-ghadab. It is that faculty in you that brings together and embodies appetite and anger. And then we talked about appetite, and here again we emphasize the fact that nothing in you is evil intrinsically, nothing. So the shahwa, which can be such a big problem for us if it's not properly developed and brought under control, but it, in its origin in the fitra, is positive, positive, positive. Win, win, win. And it is a faculty that is created to do what? What is it supposed to do? You have to speak a little bit louder.
acquire benefit.
Right. And that's what it's there for, to acquire things, to get you to consume things, to get you to, to eat, to drink, to get warmth, to cool yourself off if you're hot, to get out of the sun if the sun is so strong it might give you a stroke. All of that is connected to shahwa. So therefore, appetite has in it, although we don't regard appetite to be intelligent in the way that intellect is, but it does have in it this natural inclination. We could also call it maybe a physiological intuition of what I need. Just like the baby who is born, who intuitively knows that he or she has got to nurse. And they know how to do it and everything. It's amazing, isn't it? So that's shahwa. And the baby has to do this to live. It's got to get the nourishment. So shahwa, therefore, is fundamentally concerned with manafi'. And if we want to put it in more legal language, it's fundamentally associated with masalih. And this is very important because the basic purpose of the Sharia is jalb masalih. Okay, and the shahwa that is created in you as one of your most fundamental instincts, it is connected with that too. There's a compatibility between them. It's a very beautiful worldview and extremely consistent, and it brings everything together in a harmony. And then we looked at anger, and we saw that anger is an instinctive quality, the fundamental purpose of which is what? To protect us from harm. To ward off harm. And so it is there, لِدَفْعَ الْمَفَاسِدِ, لِدَرْء الْمَفَاسِدِ. That's its, and again, the second purpose of the Sharia is دَرْء الْمَفَاسِدِ. جَلْبُ الْمَصَالِحِ وَدَرْء الْمَفَاسِدِ. We say دَرْء الْمَفَاسِدِ مُقَدَّمٌ عَلَى جَلْبِ الْمَصَالِحِ, by the way. That the warding off of harm takes priority over the acquisition of benefit. This is a fundamental rule of the Sharia, very, very important, and a rule of thumb in life. You always want the potential benefits to outweigh the potential harms. And we don't want to take chances that, well, there are a lot of potential harms, but it's going to be okay. That's not the way we think with aql. We weigh things very carefully, and we say there are potential benefits, there are potential harms. We've got to try to weigh and measure. And you do that in your businesses, you do that in many other things, right? And before I want to do something, in fact, scholars would even say before it's halal to do it, the potential benefits must outweigh the potential harms. They can't be equal to the potential harms or less than, because dar'ul mafasid muqaddam ala jalb al-masalih, because the warding off of harms takes priority over the acquisition of benefits. So this is very beneficial, this ruling. And even when we speak as human beings, as moral human beings who believe in God, we have a similar criterion. So, and may God enable us to train ourselves to follow that. So I shouldn't say anything if it's not true. That's number one criterion. And are you sure it's true? What is your source of information? How do you know it's true? We have to be really careful about that. And may we all be that way, be people of truth. We're careful about what we say. I was in China recently, and in one hotel we stayed in, they had these Chinese words of wisdom in English, fortunately, so I could read them. And one of them was, you know, when you hear something said, do not repeat it until you actually know it's true. And they said it more poetically, but that's so true. You know, we hear things all the time, but like verify that this is actually true before you begin to spread it. And so we want to make sure what we say is true to the best of our ability. And then we want to make sure, box number 2, that saying that thing which is true will not bring harm. And here we put harm first because درء المفاسد مقدم على جلب المصالح. So there are many things that are true, but if we say them, it will be a disaster. And just because something's true doesn't mean that I have a right to say it. After all, riba, backbiting, which is one of the biggest of all sins, is always true. Riba is never false. You know, look at the clothes that he's wearing. You know, look at the way he eats. He's overweight. Okay, all of this is probably true, but you're not supposed to say it. And why? Because among the maqasid of the deen is al-ird, hifdh al-ird, you know, honor. And you have honor. Every child of Adam has honor. So I have all kinds of faults, and we're all in the same boat. But we don't talk about each other's faults unless it's absolutely necessary to do that. And that backbiting is one of the greatest sins of all, although it's always true. It's always true. But there's certain things that are true that we don't talk about for the sake of the honor of other people. Ibn al-Wardi says, تغافل عن أمور فإنه لن يبلغ الكمال إلا من غفل. Which is funny. He means it to be funny, but he says, overlook certain things, تغافل عن أمور, as if they didn't exist, because no one attains perfection إلا من غفل, except for the person who's negligent. That's funny. But what he means is the person who overlooks lots of things. We don't have to comment on everything. And so we have to know that what we say is true, and then it's not going to cause harm. And then also, will it cause benefit? Jalb al-masalih. Because it may be that what you want to say is true. And it may be that it won't cause any harm, but they're not going to listen. So in that case, there's no need to say it. And sukut at that time is the preferred option. And that is, you know, as sukut, this is the kind of silence based on intellect, which pollinates the intellect. And this is silence that is golden, by the way. And so may God enable us to understand these things. But it's really beautiful because this worldview goes through everything. It goes through our morality, it goes through our law, and then we see even in the structure of the human soul, you have this. You have a faculty, shahwa, which was honed, which was created to bring you benefits. And if you develop it, it will do that. But you have to develop it with the intellect and with knowledge. And we have another faculty, anger, which is such a big problem for us, right? But it's also good in that it was there to protect us from harm and to protect the ones we love and our families and our countries and everything else. So ghadab is basically very good. It's just that it's powerful. And
we have to bring it under control. Yet instinctively, if we will do that, it will enable us to ferret out, or to find harms. And all of this comes with your perfection of yourself. And so when we get the soul right, and we get the intellect right, and we get the heart right, and we get the spirit right, then you have that insan candle. You have this perfect human being, male or female, in which everything is where it's supposed to be. And you are that person. There's nothing keeping us from that but ourselves. It's not like some of us are, able to, are made to be this way and others are not. No, we're all made to be this way. It's just that we have different struggles. We have different challenges. And I think that's enough said about yesterday. I hope that I didn't take too much time, but I probably did. So today, we come to the continuation of the lesson. And here we'll continue with what we were just talking about. Appetite and anger. And the fact that everything in us must have this physiological dimension that it's paired with. So we never eliminate that. Even the human spirit, to repeat what we've said, it rides on the back of your animal spirit, the one that's connected with the liver. So all of this needs to be sound, all of this needs to be right. And the more that you get it that way, the faster you'll go, the longer you will persevere, and the more that you will attain. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And in all things, we have an animal component and we have a human component in will, like the desire to do certain things and not do other things. We have an animal will, and we also have a human will, and these go together. Each human being then is a remarkable combination of beast and angel. And by beast, I mean animal. Animal and angel. This is what makes you this incredible being who can be the steward of the earth. Because all the animal world, all the plant world, all the mineral world, these are all in you too. And then also everything that is an angelic quality, that's in you as well. But they're connected. They're not disconnected. So the son and the daughter of Adam, they have to develop these to the fullest. And we have to be human beings who walk on the earth with our feet on the ground. And we have to also have our heads in the sky. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The power of speech is one of these faculties that we have, which is very strongly connected to intellect. And just as intellect is that quality that enables us to transform the animal dimension of us to something higher, so also speech is one of those gifts of intellect that gives us the tools to do that. That we are these incredible animals that are able to speak. Of course, we have other animals that communicate, and they can communicate by sound or by other means. Bees communicate, ants communicate. Certain animals speak to each other. They have certain kinds of language. Often they use body language, like they put back the ears or they put up the ears. They communicate. So it's not just the ability to communicate, but it's the ability to put abstract meaning and truth into sound, and then to communicate it, and then you understand it, and we receive it. So this miracle of speech, of language, this is one of the gifts we have that enables us to go above the animal and, to perfect it. And just as speech is one of those remarkable qualities that distinguishes us, intelligent speech, careful speech, so also is the quality of wisdom and knowledge. And in the process of the perfection of this being who we are, knowledge is absolutely essential. That's why we would hope in teaching these things that we're teaching here today, just the reception of that knowledge hopefully will be a big help. It gives us the tools and it gives us the empowerment that enables us to begin to do consciously the kind of things that we probably aspire to do naturally. So we have knowledge, and knowledge is the food of the heart. We call it qut al-qulub. Your heart has to have knowledge, and your heart loves knowledge. And this is why, and it doesn't matter who you are, the human heart is created to cherish knowledge and to love it. And we know many people who don't like knowledge at all. They're totally unconcerned with it. But when that is the case, it actually means that the heart's not really where it's supposed to be. That person has neglected to develop certain intrinsic aspects of their heart. Because if that heart begins to be set right, they will want to know. And that knowledge will benefit them greatly. And today we live in a generation when many people are, as it were, averse to knowledge. It's very difficult to teach them. The generation that we have today, which God bless them and guide them, which is a spin-off of the entertainment generation that was created by television, amusing ourselves to death. That's a book, by the way, by Neil Postman. Very, very beneficial, amusing ourselves to death. He wrote that in the 1980s. That's in the age of television. He didn't know about the internet. But that book is very, very beneficial, amusing ourselves to death, especially because it shows how television didn't just entertain us, but, sorry? And didn't just brainwash us, it does that too, but it changes the culture and it changes the psychology. It does much more, than just entertain. And in fact, especially in the case of Americans like myself, the main wedge of television in changing the culture and everything else was the TV commercial. Yeah. The commercial, for cigarettes or for, particular soaps or for cereals that you eat for breakfast that's going to change your life. And, all this. And all of this, as we know, is a highly developed profession using psychology, ways to catch our attention, and so forth. And, billions of dollars were put into TV commercials and still are. And the TV commercial becomes the standard by which everything else on American television has to be done. And then even religion. So you have this TV religion of the, the televangelist, of the TV preacher, using all the techniques of entertainment, to bring you to religion. And, Sesame Street too, which, I don't want to say anything bad about Sesame Street, but nevertheless, Sesame Street has a lesson in it which may not be so beneficial. And that is that all learning is fun. And that's not necessarily true. If you're going to be something in your field, like to be a great doctor, or to be a great lawyer, or to be a mathematician, or a historian, or a master of Islamic sciences, it's not all fun. And it's not all 3-minute, ecstasies over some particular thing, like the golden section, for example, which you can put on YouTube in the most incredible way for 3 minutes. There's going to be loss of sleep. You have to memorize, you have to work. So in this regard, as good as Sesame Street is, and I never was bored watching it, by the way, and I used to love to watch it with my children. It's very entertaining, and it is beneficial, but it also has this subconscious message that learning is fun, and that can be very destructive, because if you're going to be an A student, and if you're going to be the best in your field, that's not fun. That's discipline. And, I know we have here some athletes, and is being a professional athlete fun? I mean, it's painful, right? And some of the best basketball stars in the world, the shot that they master, they might have to do 60,000 times a day. Really, until they get totally in the zone. Totally in the zone. That's not fun. It's pain. So there has to also be that. In addition to the fact that in reality, not all monsters are cookie monsters. And in traditional societies, our fairy tales told us about evil, because it's also out there, and I really have to know about that. I have to know that, there is evil out there. Sesame Street never has that, and that is a radical difference between it and between traditional stories and so forth that raise children, because they do tell them the dark side also. And the child has to know that. They've got to protect themselves. Again, protection from harm and acquisition of benefit. We want both. But you can't just take protection from harm and rule it out as if it didn't exist. We don't live in paradise. So knowledge is very important for us. And today, we have to restore the heart so that we can have the patience to get knowledge. And in music today, you have the 3-minute rule that the musician, whether it's pop music or whatever it is, every 3 minutes you've got to do something new. Otherwise, you will lose the attention span of your listeners. If you listen to our traditional Arab music or Islamic music, we might have a particular theme that goes on forever. It never stops. And that is unsupportable for many people today, because it's 3 minutes, and sometimes even shorter. So so to be able to get the attention of people in the world of the iPad and the iPhone and all these apps and all these games and so forth, we have a generation of people who are captivated by the screen, captivated by images, but they might not be able to make eye contact. They may not be able to listen. Social media tends to be also antisocial, profoundly antisocial. And how do we teach that generation? We live in a world that is run by banks, and it's run by movies and images, and it's run by technology. And we've created human beings who are very easy to manipulate and to use in that world. And we have to bring back knowledge, and we have to bring back the capacity to sit and to listen. We're sitting here for a long time. Yesterday we were here for 2 hours, and this morning we have the same intention. I hope you don't mind. And if you want to go home, you can. And then we're going to try to meet again today for the same time. Many people today that is torture. That is sheer torture. And maybe we should lighten it up and things like that. We want to get people to enjoy it. But again, when the heart is sound, it loves this. It loves knowledge. It has the ability to give it everything and to take that thing. And in fact, just like coal can be transformed into a diamond, so also that pain and discipline of knowledge, and I know this is true for you as well in your studies, it also can become something very beautiful because of the rewards you get from it, just like taking bitter medicine that makes you feel good. So after that, I liked the bitter medicine, even though in the beginning I hated it, but it made me feel so good. I'm able now to take it. And this is what happens to us in learning too. It is very difficult, very painful. It's torturous. But after a while, you get to where you like it because of the effects. It has a payoff that is absolutely fantastic. So knowledge and wisdom, these are the food of the heart. And every human being has a certain capacity for that and finds a treasure in that. And even the most simple people. And again, when we look at children, and God keep our children sound, but children are interested in things. Children don't get bored easily. They do move around a lot. But in a sound society, even the most simple of people, they find life amazing. And this reminds me of a story I love very much about the great saint Abu Bakr al-Shibli and a peasant woman. And this peasant woman was really fascinated by the fact that, when she would harvest wheat, which is relatively small and it's going to have worms in it because they didn't have pesticides, when she grinds it, there's no worms left. And then when they harvest fool, the fava bean, which is much bigger, it'll also have in it worms. They don't have pesticides. That's the natural world we used to live in. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf's grandfather used to tell him that an apple that a worm won't eat, I don't want to eat either. It used to be in those old days that most of you never knew that you bite into a worm and an apple and you may bite into a worm. Your chances are like 50-50. And I remember, growing up in a state where Georgia, where they grow peaches, it's a peach state, and they're very good. But how many times do you bite into the peach and oh my God, there's other things they're biting into it as well, So as he said, that, whatever they don't want to eat, I don't want to eat either. But, we have to try to bring things back, to where they ought to be naturally. So knowledge and wisdom, these are the foods of the heart. They're the nutrition of the heart. And when the heart does not have knowledge, let's finish the story of Shibli. Forgive me. You know it already. You have to forgive me for repeating it. But so this peasant woman, she's excited. She wants to know. See, now that's what I want to focus on here, that this shows that she is a healthy human being. Is she highly educated? No, she's not. She probably can't even write. Just guessing. And this is over 1,000 years ago. And so somebody directs her to a Shibli. Now, did they do that to make fun of her? I don't know. But she goes to a Shibli like a child. And she wants to know, why is this? I grind the wheat, there are no worms. I grind the fool beans, and there's still worms. And a Shibli is also like a child, because he's one of the Rabbaniyun, the great awliya. They're like children too. They don't get bored. And everything to them is fascinating. And it may be he knows what the people possibly are doing with her. But he said, من صحب الكبار سلم. من صحب الكبار سلم. Whoever keeps the company of the big ones, meaning of course the awliya, will be safe. And that is true. And it can be applied to fool beans. They're bigger than wheat, you know. And she is so happy. Oh, I've got it. And can I thank her enough? Because I get the benefit of that question of the simple peasant lady. It's funny, you know, and it's also great truth. That's one of the great things about the Sufis. They have a great sense of humor. Dhu Nun and Masri. They asked him, what is the greatest name of God? He said, and what is the least greatest name? And again, it's really humorous, isn't it? But it's true. Which name of God is the least? None of them. So it's a true statement, but also it's very humorous. They also asked him, what is a Sufi? And he said, no, Abu Hafs, they asked Abu Hafs, what is a Sufi? He said, the Sufi is the person who doesn't ask what is a Sufi. He doesn't have to ask what is a Sufi. Anyway, let's get back to work. So the heart, it needs knowledge. And may God make this knowledge of the heart for us. So it nourishes my heart. It nourishes your heart. And it needs wisdom. And this is its nutrition. And again, a sick person may not be able to eat. You may have to work with them to get them to be able to eat, right? And this is the way we are too. When we don't want knowledge, and when we can't take in knowledge, as so many of us are today, then there's something wrong. There's something fundamentally wrong. And again, we have to pay a lot of attention to this technology that keeps developing every day. You know, that what does it do to us? If it shuts the door of knowledge, this is not something to be welcomed. We need to be human beings. We've got to be able to get knowledge. We have to be able to have patience with it. And also human contact, you know, looking at each other, listening to each other, being able to sit politely in each other's company. This is also absolutely essential. And one of my friends who's a neurologist, he pointed out to me that a lot of the young generation, and God bless all of you here who belong to that generation, and make you lights in that generation. But he said that, you know, and he's talking about the ones who really live on the internet. They live on their iPads and iPhones and so forth, as so many do today. They always have this phone in front of them. And its radiation also affects them profoundly. You know, you're tired and you open up your iPhone and all of a sudden you're not tired anymore. That's the radiation that's doing that. So he noticed that a lot of times, let's say he mentioned to me that a person came to him who had been doing something in the kitchen, was under the cupboard, and raised his head and hit it on the cupboard. Okay, well, I've done that 1,000 times. You know, I never went to the doctor, even if it hurts. And he said they'll come to him and they'll say, I have memory loss. I have this thing and that thing. And you know, he says they have a term for that now in modern psychology. So, in other words, he's looking at it as a psychological phenomenon that maybe would be sort of like hypochondria? Hypochondria, you know, when you always think you're sick and you're really not. But my question is, and I'm not a specialist in this, maybe that's not what's going on. Because we get our humanity from people. It's not just in you. That, you know, you are who you are because your mother looked at you in the eyes. And she loved you and she smiled. You learned from her smile. You learned from her eyes. And, you know, probably you had your grandmother and you had your aunts and you had others. And then we have the males in our family too. So we have to also, and the women are absolutely essential in this. And so are the men as well. But, you know, if a man is a man, it's because there were men in his life. You know, and if a woman is a woman, it's because there were also men in her life who were real men. And also women who are real women. And we get it from looking at them. We get it from being in their company. So what happens when that's cut off? Because the virtual world, which has got virtual men in it and virtual women, it cannot do that, I don't believe. And so therefore, it's like, maybe they're not strong. That's what occurs to me. Like maybe he does have memory loss. Maybe he does. Maybe it's not hypochondria. And I think that's certainly a possibility. In any case, we don't want either one, do we? We don't want to have fragility, weakness. We want to have strength. You know, the world is always challenges. And today, you know, Muslims are going to the biggest challenges imaginable in Syria and Burma, in Iraq and Libya, and you can go on and on and on. The Yemen, go on and on and on. And we tend to be amazingly strong in that, actually. And many people would wilt. They wouldn't be able to put up with what our refugees put up with. You know, they would be crushed. They would be suicidal. Not to say that some of us are not that way, or in depression. But you've got to be strong to survive in the human game. It's not all roses, it's also thorns. So when the human heart is deprived of knowledge and deprived of wisdom, for whatever reason, you know, then it sickens and it dies. It sickens and it dies. It hardens and it can't do what it's supposed to do anymore. Of course, it's got to be revived. It's got to be brought back. The great wali of Allah, Sahel ibn Abdullah al-Tustari, one of the greatest of them all, blessed man, you know, he says, your heart is the throne, the arsh, and your sadr, this is my chest, this is the pedestal. This is the kursi. And that's a beautiful metaphor, but it's not just poetic. You know, your heart represents the throne of God in creation. And your chest, you know, that holds it, is like the pedestal, the kursi. And all the world can be there. In fact, all the world is there. And in fact, we say your heart is bigger than the throne. Because your heart, you know, heavens and earth, God says, cannot contain me. But the heart of my believing servant can. This is the miracle of your heart. You know, that it can take in all this knowledge. And all this knowledge is actually stored there as well. So, how can human beings then rise above the animal qualities that are in them, and how can they become these incredible beings in which their heart is greater than the throne of God? That's the wali of Allah, man or woman, and in which their sadr is the pedestal. You know, how can they do that? And this is what you can do. You were created to be this way. Do this. To be this incredible reservoir of truth that can understand all truth and can receive it as well. And here, this is where aql comes in. Aql, that intellect, that, as we said yesterday, it has intelligence, it has incredible capacities, but it's always moral. It's always moral. The aql, in your aql, is worthy of that name. And may all of our uqul be that way. And I'm no better off in this regard than you are. When the aql says, this is good, therefore I will do it. And this is bad, therefore I will not do it. That's your aql. And you want to make it strong so that you can say that this is good and I will do it even though it's painful, even though it takes me away from pleasures. going to stay up all night studying? Yes, because I'm going to make an A. Okay, that's aql that does that. And, are you going to give up cigarette smoking? Because it's not good for your health. We know that. And the aql say yes, because it's harmful. The potential harm outweighs the potential benefit. That's aql. May Allah give us the power to do that. And then something is bad, so I'll give it up. So aql is what binds us to appropriate behavior. And always appropriate behavior. And always, in Islam and in the spiritual path, we want al-jam'u bayna al-ilmi was-salah. We want always to join knowledge, even if it's chemistry, even if it's physics, whatever it may be. We want to join knowledge with uprightness, with morality and good behavior. And in fact, we say about the great awliya, we say the qutub, for example, al-muta'ali fi kulli shay. He is the one who is exalted in all things, in all knowledge. The qutub is like that. It's like he knows everything. Okay? And huwa kal-maliki fi kulli shay. He's like the king in everything. But al-jami' bayna al-ilmi was-salah. He is the one who brings knowledge and uprightness together in everything. That's the secret. That's why your aql has got to be fundamentally moral, and I have to empower it. I've got to be able to listen to it. And I'm not doing any better than you may be doing in this regard. We've got to empower the aql so that I'm going to do this even though it's so difficult to do it. Okay, this is the secret. Now, another thing is that, you are created good. You're created perfectly. There is no fault in you. You are really put together well. And part of that goodness and that excellence of your creation, be thankful for that, and never believe that you're anything less than that. On the spiritual path, you have to have humility. You have to see other people as above you. But you have to have also, ironically and paradoxically, self-esteem. Because you are somebody. You are, no matter who you are. That's why there's a day of judgment for everybody. Because everyone has got to account for what did you do with these gifts. So part of this goodness of you and of every one of us is that we are created to obey our intellects, naturally. And we have the will, and we have willpower. And your will is created to obey your intellect. And your heart is created to obey you as your intellect. So this is very important, because even though we know that the spiritual path of getting the heart where it's supposed to be and doing these things right is difficult. And, people like me struggle with it for decades. And may it go fast for you. But nevertheless, structurally, I am programmed, and so are you, to be able to get everything in order. And you're born that way. You're born with everything intact. The program is perfect. All you have to do is set it up. But then you have to make sure that it's not invaded by viruses, or it's not overthrown or distorted by some other thing. So everything in you, everything about you, no matter who you are, is designed by God to obey your intellect, to do that miracle, and to obey your heart. And we say this, knowledge again is nourishment of your heart, but also it's encouragement. And this is one of the things that we'll talk about, and silencing the heart. And you can do that just by telling your heart, Usmut. Be silent. When your heart is silent, there's no anxiety, there's no worry, there's no tribulation, and then wisdom comes in. But your heart is designed to do that, just like a excellent horse is designed to be trained. If you've never trained it, it's going to be difficult to do that. But it's not impossible, because it's in the horse's nature, especially the great horses like the Arabians. It's in their nature to be trained, and they like it if it's done properly. So all of this reflects the way that you're structured, the way that you're set up. It reflects God's mercy. He gave you this incredible apparatus. It also reflects God's fairness. He makes things, fair for us to live this life and to do what we're supposed to do. It also reflects His justice. That His justice is predicated in mercy and fairness, in creating in us everything we have, even our most powerful drives, like the drives of appetite and the drive of anger. So we have an intellect, we have will, we have what we call willpower, when power and will come together, and we have a heart designed to be stronger than everything else, as strong as these other emotions are, and to be able to bring them under control. So this is important to know, that you will win. You're going to win this battle. It's not impossible. It's not possible for your sister or your brother, but impossible for you. No. You're designed to win this. It's just that, we have to give it the effort that it requires. And of course, in that, part of God's mercy is you get a huge reward. If it were easy, then the reward would also be little. But you're designed to win. And you will win, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. So the special distinction of the great scholars, the righteous scholars, and the saints, and of course those who are greater than them, the prophets and the messengers, is the power of their intellects to perceive the truth and to perceive the ends of things, the purposes of things, and to enlist the soldiers of their hearts, especially willpower towards those ends, to be able to discipline themselves and to do what is right. It's said of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Al-Qadi Iyad is one of the people who says this in his beautiful book, Ash-Shifa, Huquq al-Mustafa, and he says in that beautiful book that the intellect of God's messenger, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is so great. And he says this after studying him thoroughly and knowing him intimately, that if you were to put his intellect in one scale and to put all of our intellects in another scale of all human beings, he would outweigh them all. And that is not an exaggeration. That is not an exaggeration. That's the truth. So in cultivating what Imam al-Ghazali calls the soldiers of your heart, junud al-qalb, like will and power and intellect and so forth, not easy to do, but you're designed to win if you'll just do it. And this will bring you happiness. Nothing will bring you happiness like that. Again, perhaps we could use the metaphor of exercise, like the exercise of an athlete. That it's so hard to do that. But when you do it, you become very happy. You have a tremendous sense of accomplishment. You have a tremendous sense of accomplishment. You have a tremendous sense even of pleasure, that comes from honing your body so that it can run that distance, or it can do those movements or whatever it may be. And the same is true with our spiritual self. That when we begin to discipline ourselves, we feel good. Just as I and all of us know, when we indulge ourselves and we don't do that, whatever pleasure we may have gotten, or whatever wound we may have inflicted with our idiotic anger out of control, whatever victory we have there, we feel miserable after that. This is also part of God's mercy, because we're set up, because of shahwa and ghadab, to love pleasure and to dislike pain. That's one of the fundamental physiological paradigms. This is why the intellect's got to come in, because if I just do what's pleasurable, I will destroy myself. And if I avoid everything that's painful, I'll never be anything, never learn anything, never accomplish anything. There's got to be discipline. There's got to be pain in the proper proportion. There's got to be also pleasure, but in the proper proportion. But in doing that, in cultivating that, you get real pleasure. And inshallah, we're on the door of Ramadan, this incredibly beautiful month. And this is a time when we work with the soldiers of the heart. Let's get it right. Let's discipline ourselves. And may we do that beautifully in Ramadan, and may we do it so beautifully that it continues afterwards. Your advancement along this difficult path is what we call the spiritual journey. This is suluk. This is your traveling, your wayfaring. It's just working with you, getting yourself right, getting everything in the right place, disciplining ourselves, and so forth. And then when we do this right, we get all kinds of benefits. All you've got to do is open your heart and the light will rush in. I veil my heart by all the idiotic things I do, all of my shortcomings. Once you remove those veils, then the light comes in. Bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. And this thing that we call the spiritual journey, it has special circumstances. It has various degrees. It has states and stations. It has its difficulties. It has also its facilitations, its eases. Although the higher that you climb, the further that you can fall. So you have to be attentive in this process also to get it right, and inshallah, keep it right. And this is also what we're talking about here. Spiritual journey is what the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ call tazkiyatun nafs. This is the purification of the soul, one of the greatest things of all. We're going slow, aren't we, today? And we still... So now, Imam al-Ghazali, he tells us that given the structure of our metaphysical heart and the nature of shahwa and the nature of ghadab and the nature of human intellect and intelligence, which is one of the functions of that, intelligence and intellect are not the same, because intelligence can be immoral. Intelligence, the ability to calculate and to think, which is a spin-off of intellect. But intellect's got to have al-jam'u bayna al-ilmi wa salah. So if I have ilm without salah, then something else is happening. Very likely to happen. So here he says that we have in our hearts 4 dimensions. First of all, or 4 potentials. You have, first of all, the Rabbani. That you are a Rabbani. You are a Rabbaniya. This is what you're supposed to be. And if you do that, the accomplishment will be beyond measure. And every one of us is created to be that way. Again, one of the things that makes it easy for us to be that Rabbani, that man or woman of the Lord, is company. Keeping the company of good people. And the Prophet told us that. لا تصحب إلا مؤمنا. That doesn't mean we cut off our friends and families, but you want to have suhbah with the believer. Very, very important. And the higher the believer is, the better that company is. So we have the lordly dimension, and we have also the shaitani dimension. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. So God inspired you through ilham to know the satanic, the demonic, and ilham is always positive. So in order for God to let you do what you have to do in this world, you have to have the knowledge of good and evil. And, you can't withstand evil if you have no sense of it. Of course, you could also do the other thing, which is to follow it. That's demonic. But all of us have in us the gifts of the angels and the deprivations of the demons. That makes the test a real test. But it also makes you extremely intelligent and extremely gifted when you begin to get that under control. And then we have in us the dimension of the predatory beast, as-sabr, the ferocious predatory beast. And then we have in us the dimension of the behemoth, of the ordinary grazing animal that likes to eat and drink and just live that way. And of course, for the behemoth, that's what you're supposed to do. But I'm not supposed to be a behemoth. Okay? And so we have to deal with that. And Imam al-Ghazali said, therefore, people who do not discipline themselves and who do not put knowledge in their hearts and wisdom, or sound knowledge and wisdom, and who do not discipline themselves so that the intellect is where it ought to be, ultimately they may create in their heart an idol, a sanam. And he calls that the idol of the pig. And, the pig is shahwa, out of control. No, shahwa in control of you. So that is, the metaphor of that is the idol of a swine in my heart, whom I bow to and whom I respect. And whenever it tells me, do this, do that, eat this, drink that, I can't disobey. This is why we say that even in something as simple, as going to the kitchen and opening the refrigerator and not taking out a snack, which is hard for me, especially in Lebanon, where the food is so good. This country is very difficult, the food is too good. How can you withstand the temptation? But especially in our lives, there's great benefit and thawab in just saying, no, I'm not going to eat that now. And this is what Ramadan is teaching you, that I can say no to my appetite. I'm not going to drink and I'm not going to eat. That is so beneficial. And the spiritual power of that is so great. And, here in Beirut, this beautiful city, and may God protect your beautiful city and your country, and all of Bilad al-Sham, and all of the lands of the Muslims and the Arabs. But that when Ramadan comes, are people going to be depressed? Are they going to be sad? Maybe some. But most no. We are overjoyed, aren't we? Even those of us who don't pray and fast. And this is again because of the pleasure that comes to us, the worst of us and the best of us, from that discipline, the accomplishment. And may we be able to do it every single day. And may we reap the rewards of it, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But when the appetite, which is so good in its origin, gets in control, it makes itself into an idol of a pig who commands us. And that pig can be vicious. do this, do that, do this. And then I bow every time. I make sajda every time. I cannot disobey you, my Lord. My Lord pig? You know? You know, so, and Imam al-Ghazali says that please don't think this is just majaz.
No.
Because he said this is actually min ulum al-mukashafa. He said the awliya actually see idols like that in people's hearts. And one of the most common is that of the swine. The swine, who just can never be filled, never be saturated, never be overindulged. And then you have the idol of the dog. And the dog here is what? Ghadab. But the dog here is not a puppy dog, you know, and it's not a nice German shepherd who's been trained, but it's a vicious attack dog. A vicious attack dog. And again, this is anger out of control, but not out of control. Anger in control of me. And it's an idol of a vicious dog. You know, and I bow to it every time. You know, you hear a word and you go off. You've got triggers. And, you know, and you've known people like this, and maybe we've even been like that. And, you know, I know of certain people that, you know, if you trigger their anger, oh my God. And it's almost like they're insane. It's almost like they're insane. You know, no need for examples. I have an example really clearly in my mind, but we won't get into that. But there you have the dog. And this is not a trained dog. A trained dog is a noble animal. And Shafi'i fiqh, we even talk about that. The dog that has value, which is like the hunting dog or, you know, the watchdog or something like that. It's very special. So this is not that kind of a dog. This is the attack dog, vicious. And does it have intellect? It overrules intellect. And of course, when we have that dog in our heart, and we bow to it and we prostrate to it, you know, then we feel horrible, don't we?
Yes.
And, you know, after the anger has done its thing, it's like, you know, I feel so stupid, like the most stupid person on earth. How could you say this? How could you do this? You know, where was your mind? It wasn't there. It wasn't there. And this is one of the worst. And then you have the idol of the devil himself, of Shaitan himself. And that's when the appetite and the anger have taken over to such an extent that he manipulates them. And now, because if anger is just in control by itself, it's outrageous, it's idiotic, but it's not necessarily evil. It's just improper. And if appetite is out of control and, you know, we can't control our weight and we can't keep our health, you can't protect our bodies, our arteries are clogging up and so forth like that, or we have other bad habits like smoking. It's not a good habit at all, you know, but, you know, we become addicted to it. You know, it's not evil, you know, it's just that I can't control this appetite. And I'm addicted to food. I'm addicted to, you know, other things like that. So, but then if we don't control this, it ceases to be something that can be said that is not evil. Then Satan takes it over. And then he begins to manipulate our passion of appetite and our rage of anger in a way that is extremely demonic. Very demonic. And that's really difficult. So it's like if you let that idol of the pig remain there and you keep bowing to it, you know, and also the idol of the dog, in the end, Satan will become the idol himself. And the dog will be his dog, and the pig will be his pig. And this is the lowest we can go. And in fact, this even brings us to the point of, instead of being awliya of God, and every believer is one of the awliya of God, we may become awliya of shaitan. Because that's what that will lead to, the wilaya of shaitan. So then what Al-Ghazali is saying is that this is a shirk which is hidden, and it is in many hearts, and in the hearts of many believers. And we're not going to equate the shirk with the shirk of worshiping an idol in the world. But Imam al-Ghazali says it's actually just as dangerous. And you don't want that in your heart. You want your heart to be for God, and for good, and for truth. So smash the idols. That's what he's saying. Smash the idols. Break them. And then sweep the pieces out of your heart. Purify your heart. Empty your heart. And when the idols are broken, and when we sweep them out of our hearts, and when you have that empty heart, that's the one that becomes the throne of God. That's the one that becomes the throne of God. And that's the one, heavens and earth cannot contain me, but the heart of my believing servant, man or woman, it can contain me. Abu Hassan al-Shadili, God be pleased with him, he said that if you could open the heart of the mu'min asi, of the disobedient believer, the one who believes, but maybe he doesn't pray, maybe he doesn't fast, maybe he does all kinds of other things. But even that disobedient believer, if you could open his heart or her heart, it would blind the world. The light would blind the world. This is because of the power of the faith that is there, even though it's little compared to you. And he said, what then would be the likeness of the light in the obedient believer's heart? That would melt the world. That is infinite light. It is connected to the light of God. And when we do good, when we do dhikr, when we recite the Quran, especially in hudur, in presence, we get waridat. We get incomings of light, waridat. They come into your heart. This is why you feel so good. You did the dhikr and somehow you just feel good. You recited the Quran, especially in Ramadan, and you feel so good. And you're with it. You're able to follow it, because sometimes we're not. Our hearts become hard. But now you're able to read it and you feel so good. That's waridat. Those are incomings of light. And these transform us completely. And, we're told by Ibn Ata'Allah that there are two types of waridat. Waridat al-wusul wa waridat al-dukhul. So you have these incomings of light that come to you, they arrive to you. And this is what makes you happy. This is what makes you able to distinguish between truth and falsehood. And all of you have beautiful stories. And some of you have incredible stories. And there is stories that pertain to the waridat, when maybe your life wasn't the way it should be. And then at some point, for some reason, you just say that this is not what I'm supposed to be. And you change like that. And, this is those waridat. They arrive. And they're what enabled you to see that and to do that. But those waridat, they come and they go. And they will come, and then they will go, actually. Then you have another kind of warid, which is waridat ad-dukhul. And these are the ones that light the celestial Kaaba. And your heart, by the way, is a Kaaba also. We'll talk about that when we talk about khawatir, because the suggestions, they do tawaf around your heart. The khawatir, they do tawaf around your heart. Your heart, the Kaaba is actually They would say the likeness of the heart, the other way around. And it's also the likeness of the throne. These are all parallels. But, you have the celestial Kaaba. And in the celestial Kaaba, the angels go in by the tens of thousands, and they never come out. Every day, they come in by the tens of thousands, and they never come out. And that should be, hopefully will be, the condition of our hearts also. And this is when the heart has in it no pig, no dog, no shaitan, and no trace of that. We smashed the idols. We swept them out. We didn't allow anything else to come in. And we call that the empty heart. The empty heart. There's no furniture in it even. It is empty. There's nothing there. And that becomes the Kaaba, the Baytullah. It becomes the house of God. And now, just as the angels go into the celestial house, the Baytul Marfu'a, as they go into that celestial house and they never come out, these Waridat come into your heart and they never leave. They never leave. And this is the characteristic of the messengers and the prophets. And we can't even end where they begin. But also this is the characteristic of the great men and women of God. Their hearts are receiving light that never leaves. And therefore they go higher and higher and higher. We have many stories of women in the spiritual path. And they're quite prominent actually in the spiritual path. And the Sufis also say things about women that are remarkable, and things about men that are remarkable and truthful. But you have these anonymous stories, such as, for example, Zunun al-Misri, who's one of the great awliya, as you all know. And he's the one that they asked him, what is the greatest name of God? He's an Egyptian. He said, and what's the least greatest? Beautiful, beautiful humor. And Egyptians are very humorous people. I think you are to the Lebanese, probably in your own way. But, Dhunun al-Misri, God be pleased with him, he was once wandering. And on a shoreline, he met a waliya, a great saint. This is what we're told. We don't know what her name was. And he asked her, where is the end of love? He's not talking about her, but like he loves God. So he said, where does this end? And she said, Ya ahmaq, you fool. She said, do you think it ever ends? Because the beloved has no end. The beloved, who is God, he has no end. We have lots of stories like that in our tradition, but we want to open our heart for that infinite love, that love that never ends. And this is why also when you do good, you feel pleasure. That's called spiritual pleasure. You have physical pleasure, like you get when you break your fast in Ramadan. How delicious is the water? How delicious is the date? Not to mention everything else we're going to eat after that. It's delicious, right? More than it ever was before. That is physiological pleasure. And then we have psychological pleasure. The pleasure, for example, of being respected by people. And we have psychological pain, like the pain that comes from people backbiting us and talking about us, or they don't invite us anymore, or, they were our friends, they don't like us. That's psychological. It's nefsi, and it hurts. And which is stronger, physical pain or psychological pain? Psychological pain. But then there is spiritual pleasure, and there is spiritual pain. And they are the greatest of all. Spiritual pain will kill you. That's why we shut down our hearts, because we can't bear it. We cannot bear it. And that's why we don't listen anymore, because we cannot bear it. The pain is too great. And then you have also spiritual pleasure, and that is second to nothing. Okay, and this is part of the mercy of God too, because even if you're not a believer, if you take care of an orphan, or you feed a homeless person, or you take in a refugee, and God, bless and protect our refugees. I mean, what they're going through, better than I, is hell. Hell. People that have to take these journeys on boats that are overloaded, that turn over in the Mediterranean Sea, and maybe a fisherman comes and pulls them out. Maybe no one pulls them out. Mothers lose their children every day. This is horrible, horrific. And then the humiliation, that comes on that journey. And then if you get to the camp, there's humiliation there too. I mean, there's no end to this, but the pleasure that comes. Let's say in fact, I know a story of Greek fishermen that began to pull Syrian refugees out of the Mediterranean. And the man just did it a few times, and he couldn't stop doing it after that. And God bless them all. This is horrific, But the thing is, he gets spiritual pleasure from that. And let's say he's a good Christian. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. I don't know.
Maybe atheist.
Maybe he's an atheist. But you get this huge pleasure from doing good. This is part of God's mercy. Because when we do good, we get great pleasure from that. So when we're finished with the talk now, but the time is up, and alhamdulillah, we finished the lesson. But when these waridat ad-dukhul come to your heart, the incomings of light that enter and don't come out. Some of the awliya, they compare them to little birds. And let's imagine, for example, that our porch here were open and there were lots of little birds, and we had food out there, for the little birds to come, and they get the habit of coming. Of course, if they saw all these people sitting here, they won't come, right? Because usually the little birds, if they come to a place where they can feed, they've got to first make sure there's nothing there. No cats, no squirrels, we have squirrels and other things. Maybe even certain big birds. So if there's nothing there, then they come and they'll eat. So they say these waridat, they're like that too. They come to your heart, but then they have to see, is there anything in there? If there is, they are waridat al-usul. They came, but they'll leave. When there's nothing in your heart but God, nothing in your heart but your love of God, which is the only intention that is valid on the spiritual path, that I want God. We don't want wilayah, we don't want karama, we don't want wealth, we don't want fame. May God protect us from all of that. We want you. We want God. Then everything good comes. Then your heart is empty. Then they come in and they never leave. They never leave. And you grow and you grow and you grow. And this is why also everything we do, the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we dress, the way we interact with each other, one of the reasons why it's important for it to be correct in a way that pleases God is you get light from that. When you do a good deed, you get light from that. And then also that light you get from it, you don't want it to leak out. And this is why we don't want to take one step forward and one step back. It's not just about reward. It's also about keeping the light. In Ramadan, you're going to get immense light. Every year you have. So you want to make sure that that light stays there. And therefore, we want to have behavior that is consistent with that for the rest of the year, so that we don't lose it. And, one of the things we'll see is that everything about you is good. We've said that a million times. But even every moral quality is good in the right place. وَمَنْ يُوقَ الشُّحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Whoever is protected from the shuh, of his soul. Those are the people to attain success. And shuh is worse than bukhl. The bakhil is the one who won't spend on his family, but he'll spend on himself. I don't know if women do that. Forgive me, men. Forgive me, men, for saying that. But the shahih, he won't spend on his family and he won't spend on himself either. Shahih, Abu Sufyan, his wife tagged him, right? Hind, when she talked about Abu Sufyan. So, shuh is evil? No. No. It's got to be in the right place. And you want to be shahih. And shahiha, when it comes to things like the light in your heart, I don't want one bit of that to be lost or given away. I want to keep it all. Just like the shahih wants to keep all of his gold and all of his silver and all of his money, and he counts it every day, or she. Forgive me, my dear brothers, forgive me. You have a place for shuh also. And every other bad attribute. Even ghadab. Because your ghadab in control will be courage. It will be generosity. It will also make you dress sharp. When we want to dress nice, and there are different ways to dress, but certain people who look spectacular, men and women, it's because they have the power of anger, therefore they have pride. And therefore, when they get under control, they may be very beautiful dressers. And all of us are dressed really nicely, but anger under control, this produces elegance. This produces elegance. So God benefit us with this knowledge, and may He make it food for our hearts. And you pray for me, and I pray for you. And we've got this beautiful month of Ramadan, our blessed guest. We're going to be so happy, we always are. When it enters, everything's different, isn't it? You can tell it. Something has changed. And when it's gone, it's sad. Even though we have Eid, the Eid is like compensation. Allahumma wafiqna. So let's take some questions, inshallah. Be easy on me. Be easy on me. Sidi.
This question has relevance to what we've discussed at the beginning about the dualist and Descartes and the polymath, how to combine ilm and salah. And during this digital age that we live in, I was researching, all this big data that we have and all that, and it seems that regardless of language, every bit of information on the internet and everything is recorded in the binary system of 0 and 1.
Yes.
And I've made some research that has relevance to what you mentioned about Descartes. And the person who created and codified the system in a mathematical module is called Wilhelm Leibniz. And when he created this, he was thinking that 1 refers to the one and only God, and 0 as nothing. That the one and only God has created everything as nothing.
Yeah.
Now, this is the binary. If you extend it to the quantum realm, quantum physics realm, then there's the bit in the digital realm, 1 and 0 is a bit, but there's a qubit that basically it takes the value of 0 and 1 at the same time. So the question of duality does not exist anymore. And quantum computing is in progress right now, and it gives exponential and unlimited storing power of information. The idea is that everything recorded everywhere is built on such a system, and I just wonder if in Islam, if anybody addressed this issue, that basically the essence of any information, regardless of language, regardless of anything, boils down to a truth, that Allah is one.
Well, that was a brilliant comment, and also an extremely good question. And I hope that the people online could hear it. I hope all of you could hear it. It's almost doesn't need an answer because it's very rich what you said. God bless you.
And
Yeah, even the word Allah, if you
Yeah.
look at it, I mean, it's 110. I mean,
So I'm not sure really how to answer that question. And I don't know enough about our intellectual history, and especially in things like mathematics, to be able to answer that. I'm just not competent to answer it. But our mathematics was metaphysical, and our geometry was metaphysical. Everything we did was that way, all knowledge rooted. And the Fibonacci series, for example, which underlies the golden section, which is the formula for beauty. Fibonacci, a great Italian mathematician, he's called Leonardo di Pisa. He lived in the High Middle Ages, 13th to 14th century. He learned this from Spain, from Muslim Spain, because his father was an ambassador to Al-Muwahhideen in Muslim Spain. And there he learned the Arabic numbers. And he introduces them into Europe. He's the one who does that. And one of the ways that he makes that really attractive is by introducing what will be called the Fibonacci series. He's also called Fibonacci, that's his name as well. So he got that from Spain. And of course, Fibonacci series is 0, 1. It all begins with 0, 1. And the 0 there is Hadratul Ahadiyya. It is the presence of God as an Ahad. God was, and there was with him nothing. كان الله ولم يكن معه شيء أو كما قال كان الله ولم يكن قبله شيء. So so you have 0, and this is in the levels of reality. In Maratib al-Wujud, this is the first and highest. And as Imam al-Junayd said, God was, and there was with him nothing, and he is now as he was then. That is one of the biggest truths of all. And I think it's related to what you're talking about.
It goes into the physical world.
And then out of that comes the first one, which is the light of the Prophet Muhammad. And this is Hadratul Wahidiyya. So these are metaphysical truths, and they are really amazing. And there's so much that can get out of them. And our great knowers of God, they were masters of these things. I wish I knew more about it, because I know very little about it, actually. But all the beauty, Islamic civilization was beautiful in everything, and highly skilled. We were highly skilled societies of guilds. We had guilds, asnaf and hiraf, and everything. And the guilds were usually had Sufi sheikhs, whether it was the leather making guild or the tanners guild, the dyers, or the metal workers, and all this was science, like tapping away with your hammer and doing it in a monotonous way to break the nafs. And even the master was saying, you broke the rhythm. This is amazing thing, really. Everything we did was beautiful, and it's based on the understanding of numbers. I have a friend who, his name is Dawood Sutton. I hope he doesn't mind my saying that. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. And that's the truth. One of the most brilliant I know. And he is a master of design and art. You might know him, Dawood Sutton. He's married to Adiba, Abdul Samad's daughter. And, he can go to a mosque, like say an Ottoman mosque, and he can show you how the guilds, because the mosques were built by guilds, and the guilds compete, and how one guild will create this incredible calligraphic design, which is perfect golden section, perfect Fibonacci series, not just in the shapes of the letters and everything else, but even in the numbers, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so forth. And then he'll show that this guild did it like as perfectly as possible, and the other guilds are trying to compete with it. They can all say, look what they did. And today we just say, this is beautiful, right? But they understood the metaphysics of color. For example, that, color begins with a duality. White, which is no color. Black, which is all color. And then you get the triads, the threes.
mulk, malakut, and jabarut. And in colors, what's the triad? Red, green, yellow. All colors are going to come out of these primary colors. You know that from your art lessons. You know? And, you know, so you have the triads. And I mean, these are metaphysical truths. And anyway, that's I really, I respect very much what you said. It's beautiful. And I'd just like to say that, you know, our dear brother, what is your name?
Hisham.
Hisham. Allah bless you, Hisham. But, you know, he mentioned Leibniz. And he mentioned the fact that Leibniz understood this and that Leibniz based this on his knowledge of God. One of the things in talking about things like Cartesian dualism is never to vilify Descartes or Leibniz or Spinoza or Kant. You know, Hume, I've got misgivings about. David Hume, John Locke, and really Hume and Locke. Locke is the truthful. I mean, Hume is the deconstructor. Hume is very honest, and a lot of what he says is like Imam al-Ghazali, but it's not, because Imam al-Ghazali has God. Hume doesn't. So Hume will open up the door for postmodernism and everything else. In fact, Kant and all the things Kant will do, which are philosophically problematic for me, they are in order to refute Hume and to prove, you know, the validity of Newtonian physics. That's what it's all about. So these people, you know, are very interesting. And with the exception of Hume, all of them believe in God. And all of them believe that God is one. And, you know, in my own life, a few years before I became a Muslim, one of the most important steps from disbelief after leaving Christianity to belief in becoming a Muslim was, in fact, these philosophers, whom I studied with a very good professor in college. And what really captivated me about all of them, with the exception of Hume, is the belief that God is one. And he's absolutely one. There's no qualification to that. And of all of these, the most metaphysical is Leibniz. But, you know, I think that's enough said about that. And God give us understanding. And may God enable us to connect with our tradition. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, because it's rich. Yes, Manaf. Did you want to ask a question? Okay. She asked me to repeat the question, but like this question I can't repeat because I have to take notes. And so, but that was a question about, you know, 0, 1, you know, the binary, which underlies the computer system. Everything digital information. And then he talked about how Leibniz himself understood that as 0 being God with nothing, and then 1 being the oneness of God and the beginning of creation. So that was a really interesting discussion. And I'm honored to have you people here, and I'm really honored, yeah, to see that's sophisticated. May God make us very sophisticated in what we do. Manar, what would you like to say?
Okay, just I want to ask you about this. We always focus on knowledge and on getting knowledge. So, which knowledge are we talking about here? Knowledge of ulum al-dunya or ulum al-deen? Because this is confusing for me.
Yeah, so we talked about knowledge being the nourishment of the heart. And our sister Manar is asking the very good question, you know.
Amal. Yeah, hope.
You're not Manar.
No, Amal.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
This is
Manar al-Huda.
Yeah.
Okay, Amal. I'm sorry. Pardon me. But that's Manar. No. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway. So what kind of knowledge?
Yeah.
And that's a very good question. Imam al-Ghazali will actually go into detail on this particular issue in Kitab al-Ilm, which is really important, which is the beginning of the Ihya. And you know, that's also really wonderful to study. Maybe we could do that at another time. But of course, the knowledge that they're going to focus on will be al-ilm al-nafi', beneficial knowledge. And beneficial knowledge is what we want. Now, beneficial knowledge is actually quite vast. First of all, we know that beneficial knowledge would be Quran, Hadith, fiqh, theology, okay? But is all of that necessarily beneficial? No. Because you have to apply it. You have to apply it. And so this is also something that's very important, that beneficial knowledge is not generic. The Quran is everything. It is so beautiful. Our saints lived in the Quran. Almost all of them memorized the Quran. And they knew it so well that they could contemplate it as a whole. Imam al-Ghazali talks about that. You know, when you recite the Quran and it's all there, because not only did you memorize it, but you're so familiar with it that it echoes. All the parts of it echo with each other. But what is the value of that knowledge of the Quran if I don't practice it? Then al-ilmu la yuhmilu sahibahu. You know, knowledge does not leave the person who cultivates it alone. It either destroys them because they don't practice it, or it elevates them because they do. من عمل بما علم أورثه الله علم ما لم يكن يعلم. Whoever will put into practice what he or she has learned, God will give them as an inheritance. As an inheritance, that's a very important word. The knowledge of what they didn't know. So we have to practice. And as we said, an ilm has to be with salah. And salah is practice. Sound practice in the heart and outside the heart. And then what about other things like chemistry and physics? And our brother mentioned computers, digital technology and so forth. Is that nafi' or ghayr nafi'? And Imam al-Ghazali will say that it's also nafi', you know, when it's used for the purpose of bettering our lives and enabling us. I mean, we have to have the animal spirit to ride on in our physiological self, and we've got to also eat and drink and build buildings and be able to protect ourselves and to develop our lands and resources and so forth. And we can't do that without other types of scientific knowledge. Okay, but here again, one of the greatnesses of Islamic sciences is that we've rooted knowledge in metaphysical truth. And again, we talked yesterday about Jabir ibn Hayyan, and he is one of the masters of that. Some people say he's the one who started it. He was a brilliant man, absolutely brilliant, a father of modern chemistry. And you can take his book, Kitab al-Sab'in, which is one of his books in chemistry, the book of 70. And it's got 70 chapters, but he didn't just pick that number arbitrarily. This man is a mathematician, he is an architect, he is an astronomer, he is a physician, you name it. So he knows what he's talking about too. But how does he begin Kitab al-Sab'in? And one of my teachers, God bless him, he said, you have to read this. So I did. And it said he begins with the praise of God. Beautiful praise of God. You read it, it's beautiful, it's poetic, and it's coming from his blessed heart. And then he goes into Tazkiyatun Nafs. And not just a word or two. Detail Tazkiyatun Nafs. And then he says words to the effect that if you do not harmonize in this praise of God and the imperative to purify your soul, you have no need to study chemistry. And as we said yesterday, you know, that for our modern mentality, it's like, what? I mean, what? Because our chemistry, as we teach it today, it has no imperative of salah, but theirs did. And that's because that knowledge also is going to be the knowledge of God. Just as our brother said, that when we take this digital information, which all of you who've studied these things know. You know how to compute this and how to work with it and so forth. You know how vast it is, but it's got to be joined with salah. And part of that salah is to understand how it relates to the world of metaphysical truth, of creation from nothing, and the knowledge of God, which is the greatest knowledge of all. And in Islamic science, why would we study about water? You know, we were the greatest hydrologists, certainly among the greatest hydrologists the world's ever seen. And, you know, I know that in your countries in the mountains of Lebanon and the mountains of Syria and elsewhere, I know that you've still got to have remnants of this incredible hydrology. You go to Spain and go to the mountains of this beautiful village where we have lots of brothers and sisters called Orchila. And the water system there, they call it, they call it Sakia. In Spain, I think they call it Sakia, they call it Sakia or Sakia, I don't remember how they say that in Spanish, from Sakia. And the families that still run it are the families of the Muslims who were there, because they know how to do it. And it's still what the Muslims built. Beautiful. But the Muslims have to, other people don't know how to run it, even to this day. And like, the fountains of Al-Hamra that the Muslims built, we don't know how they got the water to do the things it did. And in fact, one of the lions, in the courtyard of the 12 lions, they have this fountain. They took it apart over 30 years ago to figure out how they did. They couldn't put it back together. They couldn't put it back together. So we were amazing people. But why do we study about water? To know about us, because water is love. Water is life. A beautiful garden is beautiful because of the water, and that water is love. And your heart's like that too. You've got to fill it with love, and then it will be a garden. And if you were to deprive the garden of water, or if you were to torch it, and it would be ugly, wouldn't it? And the same thing with your heart. Hatred, rancor, jealousy, this is fire. It ruins the heart. So, and this to us is essential to scientific knowledge. That anything I study, physics, mathematics, geometry, embryology, whatever it is, it's also to discover me and to discover that world out there and to know God. And everything we did was like that. And our sciences, were fantastic. They were, really and truly. And calculus, we had that. Thabit ibn Qurra, he's not a Muslim, but he's a great mathematician in that civilization. He sabit to camel. And, we did so many things. But the muntalaq, the point of departure and all of that, for us was for me to know me. And here, if we go back to the same age our brother Hisham talked about, where you have Francis Bacon and you have others, the new science of Francis Bacon, basically for him, the purpose of science will be power and, of course, wealth. Power and wealth. That's a different intention. And even Bacon will say things like, we will force nature to reveal her secrets, like whether she likes it or not. That's ugly language, isn't it? And that's arrogant language, isn't it? And we would never do that. And again, this is not just a matter of, protocol or adab. It's like, if I want to know that world that God created, I have to approach it with awe. And I have to approach it with adab. And our modern science is pretty good on this now, that we use instruments. Descartes, who was a good man, he was a genius, there's no question about that. He made a mistake. He made actually more than one, and saying that reality is res extensive, things extended into space, that's a definition of thing. No, it's not. I don't agree. Things are not so simple. They can't be reduced to that. And then you have res cognitans, which is, the mind that has cognition. That's not, I don't accept that. That's Cartesian dualism. You will make it impossible for us to know anything. Okay, and Descartes does this because he wants to establish quantitative instrumental physics. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, the way you did it, and this is why we say Aristotle said this, we took it from Aristotle, to my knowledge, but if you make a mistake at the point of first principle, that's what you were talking about, C.D. Hisham, you have a disaster in the details. You've got to get the beginning right. And this is why we rooted knowledge. Where do we begin? What is the definition of thing? You know, what are the first principles of things? And you have to get that right. If you do, everything will fall in order. And then physics can speak to chemistry. Chemistry can speak to economics. Would you believe that? No, it can. And economics, what is economics without morality? You know, so always, salah has got to come with the ilm. And then it all becomes beneficial. And I'd like to say, in response to our sister Amal, is it? You know, that in traditional Islamic society, everything you study was supposed to increase your knowledge of God. And therefore, we never had these very dangerous divisions between secular and non-secular. We didn't have that. And we studied water. You know, one Muslim thinker, a great thinker, he says that, you know, once you define water as H2O, a lot of your students are going to stop praying. Maybe this is an exaggeration, but water is H2O, right? It's an oxygen atom, you know, and two hydrogen. Okay, no, but you know, I'm also a bag of bones, right? I'm a bag of bones, and if you call me that, it wouldn't make me happy. And if you told water you're H2O, it's like, no. Water is miraculous. Water is, God created every living thing from it. Water is love. Water is life. And so we took these things seriously. And today, you know, when we use instruments, now today modern physics, astrophysics also, is very conscious of how the instrument that you measure with changes things. And then you, who are the one who used the instrument, and you read it, that changes things. This is brilliant.
Basically, exactly about the instrument is the quantum mechanics, the debate between Bohr and Einstein, and how the instrument affects
this
the
is true.
perception of reality.
This is true. And our brother talked about quantum mechanics, and Bohr and Einstein, they discussed this. And in quantum mechanics, that's where we get the instruments, because we see the instruments are affecting things. There is a great writer who is a physicist and a mathematician. He is a Christian. He is a metaphysician. He's a Catholic, and he is a Thomist Catholic. Thomist Catholics are the Catholics who honor St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas was one of the great ones in the West. That's my belief. He was and he takes from El-Ghazali, he takes from Averroes, Ibn Rushd, he takes from Ibn Sina, he takes from others. But this man, Wolfgang Smith, he was a child prodigy. And you can look at science and myth, you can look at the quantum enigma, and what he will say is that the big problems of quantum physics today, which appear to be insoluble, they are amazing, but he says this is a metaphysical problem. And when we get the metaphysics right, we will be able to deal with the physics. You can read that for yourselves, but anyway, we'll stop here. We're out of time, and I hope we'll see you later today. And Sister, what did you want to say?
I have a question. Can I add it in?
Well, would you be able to come back later on today?
Yes.
Okay, could we maybe ask it then?
Okay.
Okay, and you could tell me what it is after class, so I try not to forget. اللهم وفقنا لما تحب وترضى وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. So, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. And